Good afternoon. In 1961, a genuinely esoteric lady, Hannah Arendt, authored a book called Between Past and Future. Neil Denari is an avid Arendt reader. Did you know that? Make it up as you go. How might Miss Arendt's text inform the contemporary design discourse? In a literal sense, we're always between past and future. We look back, we look forward, and here we are in perpetuity between a retrospective examination and a perspective destination. But that literal interim isn't what concerns us tonight. Architecture between past and future is the rising tension between strategic possibilities that occurs when the traditional pro forma no longer performs. When you're the past, you know how to do it, or think you know. When you're the future, you know how to do it, or think you know. It's what to do when you're in the gap between that's Arendt's subject. It's what to do when you're in the gap between that's Denari's subject. When the method is no longer the method, when the system's no longer the system, when the technique's no longer the technique, count on a twilight of the idols or a darkness at noon to announce the end of the presiding form language and a prescient opening for radical architecture. But an opening doesn't warranty an appearance. Before the designation of an orthodoxy as orthodox, orthodox isn't orthodoxy. It's simply the norm. But when a current modus operandi is labeled orthodox, that's a sign an alternative modus could be on the way. When architecture's reach no longer exceeds its grasp, we're in the gap between past and future. When you know what's coming is what we already know, and by then we're too late. Not so long ago, the production of radical architecture meant the production of architecture as the exception. But the advent of digital design, engineering, fabrication, and construction tools has so enlarged the generally available repertoire that the probity of the exception once called radical is now rarely exceptional. If you can't build it, if you cannot build it, and you don't, that's a drawing. If you can't build it and you do, that's radical. If you can build it and you do, that's conservative. Persona number one is comfortable being comfortable. That's intransigent. Persona number two is uncomfortable being comfortable. That's equivocal. And persona number three is comfortable being uncomfortable. That's Neil. From his home in the chasm between past and future, please welcome persona number three, Neil Denari, to SCI-Arc.
Eric, thank you very much, and thanks for coming out tonight. Nice crowd. I really appreciate it. Last week, Stephen Hall texted me. Stephen's a texter. And he said, I'm going to be giving a lecture at Cooper Union tonight, and if you're in town, please come. I'm doing a tribute to Lebbeus. And I texted him back and I said, this isn't coincidental. I'm doing the same thing. So let's start. A lot of you know Lebbeus through his work. Many of you know him and his life through him as a person. He was a very important person for me personally, and if you'll indulge me, I'm going to talk about my friendship with him, especially in the first 3-4 years while I was living in New York. While I was at grad school at GSD, I went down at the end of 1980, first semester, and went to Yop Reitman bookstore in Soho. And on a shelf underneath, off in the corner, I found this publication in 1980 that Lebbeus made. He self-published it. It was called Architecture, Painting, Sculpture. How many times in your life, especially in today's world, digital world, are you freaked out by something? Probably increasingly less. So after seeing this, shocked, I think I put it under my jacket. I walked, I paid whatever money. I said, what is this? Took it back up to Cambridge and didn't tell anybody I found it. Didn't think there was anybody who could appreciate it among my colleagues. Kept it a secret. And it was a source of inspiration, as you can imagine, although I was never drawn to sort of mimic Lebbeus's work. I moved to New York in '82 and worked for Jim Polshak, and 2 years later in '84, through Polshak's office, I met Lebbeus. And he was in a cycle of doing commercial renderings for people like KPF and so forth. He'd work strenuously for a month, make as much money as possible, and then he would subsist on it and do his own work. And it wasn't that he kept that a secret, it was just that was his modus operandi for somehow surviving and creating a sense of freedom. I left the office a couple of years later. Lebbeus and I used to hang out a lot at Storefront. You know, when we first met, we became very, very good friends and shared a lot, talked a lot about the things that interested us, cosmology and existentialism and technology and science and pseudoscience and so forth. And he had his own way of going about things, and so did I. I quit the office and I started teaching at Columbia. And I used to speak prior to that with Lebbeus on the weekend mostly at Storefront and on the telephone. And when Lebbeus knew that I didn't have a job anymore, he started calling me at 9 in the morning about 4 or 5 times a week. And the thing about that is I worked until 5 a.m. So the phone would ring. And at first, of course, I didn't know who it was the first couple of times, but every time the phone would ring, I'd jump up and Lebbeus would go, "What are you working on?" And I said, "Well, I've been up for hours working, of course, Lebbeus. I'm going all the time." And the thing is Lebbeus just appreciated work. I think first and foremost, he appreciated work. The one thing Lebbeus always wanted was to be free. Wanted to be free. A man condemned to be free carries the whole world. Sartre. Lebbeus was a serious existentialist, and in that regard, he kind of bore a responsibility of what did it mean to be free, and so therefore he took the responsibility, I think, to communicate with others, to sort of lead a fight, so to speak. I think Lebbeus annexed, the folks like me in the woodwork in New York in postmodern days to articulate arguments in our own ways. Obviously, there was a bulwark of resistance that we were trying to kind of erect against historical tendencies in architecture and so forth. But he always wanted to be free. He invented free space, talked about free politics, a new way of living and so forth. And it's pretty interesting because, of course, as you know, he always drew the world. Even when he drew discrete objects, he drew the world. And that was fundamental and fascinating for me. Here's a drawing from the architecture painting sculpture series, 1979. Of course, you can sort of see certain influences, you know, in architecture at the time through Lebbeus's work, like all of us. And Lebbeus deeply, I think, in that sense, connected to a particular culture and never wanted to be strictly seen as a kind of outsider, a person who somehow couldn't relate to the conversation. He very much did. Drawing from 1983 and from, I would say, the late 70s after he drew Einstein Tomb in 1980, stuff started going into the sky and lifting off, and a kind of platonic, solid world started showing up. And of course, everybody knows the first time they saw this stuff and what they thought. The power of the work and the drawings, the argument that's implicit, you know, in the work, I think really reflects on Eric's comments about comfort, and he was always about discomfort at every level. Now, it's going to be a little bit suicidal, I think, for me to intersect my work with Lebbeus's at the time, but it's a little bit of an introduction to the whole topic of the lecture. I moved in 82. I hadn't met Lebbeus at this time, and the first project I drew, well, maybe not the first one, was a monastery. I lived in a rat hole apartment. It was claustrophobic. It was small. I had no view. I loved it. It was amazing. Cost too much, lived in Manhattan. So producing a project that essentially represented probably the whole of my 5 years in New York. If I wasn't working or teaching, I was in my apartment drawing. And that was it. And Lebbeus, in his own way, was doing the same thing. He lived on Madison Avenue and did have champagne from time to time, and I had gyros and water. But Lebbeus, regardless of his specific sort of lifestyles, intersected certainly with me at a level of labor. So whereas you can start to see, and I'm going to kind of lay out a big and obvious difference that I guess want to talk about tonight, not simply between Lebbeus and I, but about what he taught me, I think, about architecture. So I made this project in 1983, made the drawings, built the model, and right before this, I had stopped working in pencil. I rejected the pencil because the pencil was too lethal. It was too dangerous. It was too idiosyncratic. I needed to have an ink pen that would only make a single line, that theoretically, if you took the pen, you were going to make the same line as me, sort of like clicking in AutoCAD. And Lebbeus's work, of course, wasn't like that. Every line and every stroke bore a level of personality and intensity that somehow it wasn't a question of not being able to contend with it, but that I was deciding that drawing and making something in a particular way, as matter-of-factly as I could, as hardcore and as straightforward as I could, was really, you know, the ambition. And the thought was, get the line and the artistic project out of the way so the architecture somehow could read clearly. Here's some sections of Lebbeus's projects from the late 80s in Paris and Berlin, and fascinating work. And you can also see numbers as background fields in Lebbeus's work. And you know, Lebbeus never really talked about the specifics, obviously, of any of these numerological kind of grids and fields and so forth. We didn't have to ask about them. Now, meanwhile, here I made a drawing for a small project that we actually built at Columbia, funded by the school. And look at my numbers. My numbers are telling you how many inches everything is, how many millimeters everything is, how long everything is, what nomenclature is. Pretty much the opposite of what was going on with Lebbeus's work. And the fascination, in this case, cutting a section through an oscilloscope and showing you the sine curve and showing you the tubes and the hardware and the thickness of the skin and so forth, and being obsessive about it. I had it in my apartment. I took it apart. I measured it with calipers, et cetera, et cetera. I know what you're thinking. Weirdo. Or this project for London from 1986, one of the things that Lebbeus and I talked a lot about was the phenomena of time. And we both were very interested in the possibility of the reversal of time and Schrodinger's arrow turning around. And Lebbeus, of course, as you know in his work, he always imbued his drawings with time. You never knew when the work was sort of set into motion, set into play. And this was a clock, a giant solar clock. And I told you exactly when it was built. I told you exactly when it was set into motion. The minute I finished the drawing, I said, that's it, the project exists. It's new, it's right out of the box, it's high tech. And yet, the way Lebbeus was working, I think, at the time was profound, profoundly better, profoundly more interesting than what I was doing. 17 years my senior, although Lebbeus I never looked at as having some sort of odd head start, and he never treated me as a kid. But if you look at his fields of numbers and the kind of turbulence going on, he's not concerned, obviously, about the finitude of anything and the facticity and the specificness of anything, and yet I was. We came together quite often to kind of discuss this. Here's in the solar clock a description of all of the elements in this project. I'm not sure I knew what they all were, but I wanted to be specific at some level. I gave you an item number, a description. Curiously, there's no code. I don't know why. There's not a number 22, so there must be some leakage out into the unknown. I moved to LA in '88, and Lebbeus was very, very disappointed. He said, well, I don't know why you're doing that, and I'm sure you're going to be back in 6 weeks anyway. It was ironic. I came to LA for more freedom. I think, there was an idea, like the desert represented freedom and the claustrophobia of New York didn't. Or maybe it was the virtual ceilings of politics. Maybe I didn't want to fight the fight the way in which Lebbeus was fighting, which was through pure resistance. And Lebbeus was very, very, very much a committed New Yorker in that sense, of which I was not. I think from the time I was in elementary school, I was committed to go to Los Angeles and kind of had to make good on that. After moving and working on projects, mostly unbuilt projects, although this was a commission for a project, ironically, in a loft space in New York. Moving into, let's say, different types of surface geometry and trying to get away from the heavy metaphorical logic of the more it looked like a machine, then the more it would be one, and so forth, into something that was more about the plasmas of space and time, and photographing a model like this so that reflections might allow me in this particular moment to see something that wasn't finite, that wasn't specific, that wasn't fixed, that wasn't grounded. And of course, Lebbeus's work pushed all of that to the extreme. So what's facticity? Here's the talking heads. Facts are simple and facts are straight. Facts are lazy and facts are late. Facts all come with a point of view and facts don't do what I want them to do. That's a beautiful text, and facticity is an old term. It's an old philosophical term from the 17th century. And thinking about my own urge to be specific from the very beginning, no smoke, no mirrors. If it exists, draw it. Make it finite. Is it possible to be in the world of the uncomfortable if there you are drawing something that becomes specific? Now, maybe I'm talking about drawing, and I'm less talking about the specific ambition of the design, but I want to try and mix those things together tonight. Facticity is an old term mostly associated finally in the 20th century with people like Heidegger and Sartre. which has to do with, in the case of your own self, your own being, your own birth, your own way of living. But contemporary philosophers like Quentin Meillassoux and Graham Harman have taken up facticity in a contemporary mode through object-oriented philosophy that allow a very slippery, unknown project to happen. Object-oriented philosophy basically rejects a reference to the self or to the body and actually aspires to have objects have life. And I thought, don't we always say as architects, the building's got a life, it's got a soul, something's going on with it, it's animate in its own way. So why can't we ascribe a kind of philosophy or logic whereby it's facthood? How much steel? How many bricks? How much aluminum? What is its schedule? Is it buildable? It can be. You do it. But the odd thing is, if you make a set of drawings to predict how something will go together, isn't it a weird thing for architecture to do that? Yet we want the most unpredictable response possible. So the nature of facthood and the unknown and the possibility of unpredictable conditions, that's what facticity is, and that's what I think is embedded in the work that I'm trying to do. So 1966, Miles Davis has got his second quintet going, and he's reinvented music, jazz music, for the third time. Amazing stuff. Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock. If you're into it, you know that it's a kind of high point in new modal jazz and so forth. And if you also know about Davis, you'll also know that he was a bizarre, kind of very taciturn guy. Spoke with his music for the most part. In 1966, he said, I'll play it now and I'll tell you what it means later. So I'm going to deliver the song, I'm going to deliver the tune, we're going to play it however it's written down, and when somebody says, tell me what you're doing, I'm on the progress card here, now, and later I'll tell you. So he's not exactly telling you what it is verbally, but the music is saying something, and he's making a promise to explain. He's making a promise to explain exactly what's going on. It's interesting. I can take the promise to explain tonight, to make clear, or I can tell you, I'm going to give you the facts and let you determine certain unpredictable, odd responses to the work. 1969, he's reinvented himself for the fourth time, just 3-4 years later. He goes electric, electronic, structurally out. He tells John McLaughlin in the Bitches Brew sessions, an amazing guitarist, he said, play the guitar like you don't know how to play it. Can you imagine, make me a building like you don't even know how to make one? Pretty interesting proposition if we can all only get to that point. But a sort of more confrontational, less taciturn, Davis says, I don't play rock, I play black. Shut up. This isn't rock music. This is not white. And I play black. So black in the first level is me, right? That's him saying, I'm black. And I acknowledge that in the kind of contemporary culture. Black is us as a larger group, beyond me as a sort of a black persona of a black man. We exist as a culture. Black is also otherness, a kind of third, fourth, or fifth sort of kind of dimension in cultural identity and cultural politics, and we know about that. But I think finally black in this particular case means darkness. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in the dark, can't see, and this is really what I'm searching for. So it goes from a kind of black politics of I play black, but he's saying I play darkness. I don't know what I'm doing. I ask guitarists not to know how to play. It'd be really great if we could design black. 1970. Just a year later, he's at the Isle of Wight Festival in front of 600,000 people with his group. Right before he goes on stage, the announcer says, "Miles, what are you going to play? I need to announce it to these 600,000 people." And he said, "Call it anything." So at his most radical moment, he's reinvented himself for the fourth time. He states no facts, he makes no claims, and he makes no promises for anything. It's pretty interesting to kind of think about that if you were at that sort of moment in your work where you had the greatest ambition, the hugest amount of doubt, the highest degree of discomfort, you'd almost be in the position of saying, I don't know, call it anything. Pretty powerful kind of thing for me. So facticity might be state the facts such as they are. How much aluminum? How much steel? How tall is it? What are the numbers? Then you make claims and construct arguments. Are they out of the facts, or are they a different set of facts altogether? Remember the David Byrne quotes, they don't do what you want to do. And then maybe point 3 in the process is hope for these unpredictable responses. So I have to say that's where I'm at with my stuff right now. To talk about fact, we have to talk about fiction. We live in a world ruled by fictions of every kind. The fiction is already there. We need to invent reality. That's Ballard writing in 1973. And here he is. In 1987, he's sitting in front of a copy of a Paul Delvaux painting. He was fascinated with the surrealist painter Paul Delvaux. And the mirror was a famous painting that was destroyed in World War II. No one knows what happened to it. And Ballard asked a British painter by the name of Bridget Marlin to paint a copy. He paid her £500, and she did it. She hated doing it. And here he is in front of this painting, which itself is a mirror or a copy of the original. It's got a mirror deep within the center line of the room, and of course there's the odd mismatch in terms of the reflection of the clothed and nude woman. So Ballard here is projecting obviously a kind of new reality out of all the fictions maybe that are built into this painting, and is kind of coercing them into a project. We used a mirror once, only once, in one project in a bank in Osaka. It was an odd sight, and in all of these banks we were working with sort of banal programs of offices and salon-type seating. These weren't banks for transacting money. They were really like clubs. And we had an odd space on the 19th floor of the building, and we decided to take a figure and project it out as a copy of itself. And here's the figure. We did a series of 5 banks, and the fiction we told was the ceiling is the plan. The ceiling is the thing which is basically describing how you move through the space. There's no ADA to ceilings. There's no ergonomic conditions to ceilings. So at that time we said, let's just design ceilings because we're free. We're free, and we're free at one level to argue and articulate logic within this space. So the way in which the lights work, the way in which the materials work, the way in which big flat horizontal surfaces versus radial conditions, they were trying to describe the way in which sedentary activity and movement forms of activity were working within the space. This was a discourse that, on the one hand, was not necessary to talk to our clients about. They saw it as a kind of architectural spectacle, and we ourselves produced this kind of fiction of the logic for how the space was going to work, searching for something that would kind of ignite a project. Some of you participated in 99 or 2000. Herbert Mouchamp asked, I think, 50 architects to design a time capsule that would be opened in 1,000 years. And what was interesting about it is he didn't say what was going to be in it. So it's like doing a project, you don't know what the program is, something's going to enclose something. And he said, go on Go on and do it. It's a project about futurism. It's a project about whatever you don't know. Kind of interesting because Mouchamp supplies point 2 and point 3 in the process, but he gives you no facts. We had no facts to deal with, no size, no nothing. And of course, all of those things that architects want to kind of connect with. We didn't know what to do. We weren't even designing vessels or solids. We were working with two-dimensional surfaces that didn't close on themselves. So we had enough of a problem thinking about objecthood. So what did we do? All we could do was resort to facts. And it's a funny thing to say, I'm going to resort to facts, because it's going on today in quantifiable logics. I didn't do it. It did it itself. So we gathered a series of objects that would be tall and flat and small and thin, and we arrayed them within a section, and we said all we're going to do is essentially have a vessel that will contain a particular genre of shape and form, and whatever fit that we would put inside, and we would determine the dimensions of what it is. And so we made this plan and section of the objects, and kind of like a camera case or something like that, it would somehow describe itself. So we designed it from the inside out, so you've got the wider, flatter world, and the objects were going to be self-organized within this vessel. What was frustrating about it, especially for somebody like me, who wants to state the facts, we didn't know what it was made of, which was very nerve-wracking. And we didn't know how electricity would get through it, because these tentacles have a huge amount of electricity going through them, and if anybody tried to open it, aliens or whatever, they would die before the year 3000. So that's the function of the tentacles. Projecting that level of fiction into this, it was interesting. We were desperately searching for facts and had to kind of supply them in our own kind of fictional way. Anybody remember VR? I think that was every thesis project's subject at SCI-Arc in 1997. Fuck architecture, it's over. We've got new technology and new experiences to look into. Well, pretty much this is the real VR. You and your phone and about in this case, about 3 inches of space between her one eye and the other eye of the telephone. I'm pretty sure that that eye jumped out of her head and glued itself into that phone. And that's a space, that's a world that is so much more, if I say so much more powerful than architecture, I'm saying it as a taboo. How could I say that as an architect? Sounds fatalistic as a discourse. Everyday life and so forth, but you know, the promise of quicksilver information, entertainment, whatever it is, all packaged within very beautiful design. I think everybody would know the details of Apple products far, far, far more than they would know the details, obviously, of a building. Pretty captivating world, and for me, this is one of the facts of life, as it were, not an opinion, I would say, fact. And how to make claims about this world and how to have architecture engage in this is part of what our project is. You know, the texting while driving thing is also this desperate moment of living in the physical world, basically risking your life, and still being able to operate in a world of the quicksilver and the digital. And it's just a kind of scary, weird image to kind of talk about, let's say, thinking of Eric's introduction, the between project, where we always feel like there's a lack for architecture's ability to captivate, to distract, to function at a level of performance that could yield the kind of exhilaration of this technology. Pretty interesting for me to kind of meditate on. Okay, I'm going to show you 3 projects, and do it fairly quickly, and I won't dawdle too long. This is a project for a house. It's not a project that's going to be built. It's finished. It was for a family of 4. There you see the profile, trying to determine exactly, you know, who the users are, what they like, what they want to do. And of course, in the straightforward fact facticity of their life, we created this Sankey diagram, which of course starts to mess it all up, even though we're looking at ways in which each one of the family members intersects, diverges, and imagining how the space for this project would work and go together. The big thing for this client was, we like modern architecture, we like your stuff and all of that, but we don't want an all-glass house. We don't really like that. We want privacy. We do have a kind of a traditional streak. And feeling something of enclosure, this is on a typical site in Pacific Palisades. How can we enjoy the idea of nature and the inside and the outside together, but not give it over to the project of the invasive? It's a small footprint house. I talked him down from 5,000 square feet to 2,600. So my contribution, although unbuilt, was toward an education on the sustainable small footprint project. But it made sense because although this looks diagrammatic, very athletic family, and they wanted more exterior space than they knew. And so we made the house very highly condensed in 3 stories. So our project, on the one hand, besides getting into a kind of bounding box that was going to work for their program, however it had to be packaged, as well as a project that, in relation to the idea of what is reality today in terms of the way in which we experience space, in the way in which we experience media, probably if you do know our stuff, there's a strong relationship between the nature of strokes and profiles that articulate, in this case, the end of the bounding box, and in the 3 stories, the kind of micro programs going on in them. And so for me to argue or to make a claim that this architecture tries to get in between you and the cell phone, it tries to essentially participate in that world conceptually. This is an architecture that rejects the cell phone in favor of the guardian of the real and the stuffness of architecture. It doesn't do that. It wants to get in and participate in that world without capitulating to nothingness or to pure media or to goggles, and in many respects using the traditions of architecture, a robust geometry, a kind of profound sense of craft and precision and so forth. This is what we're trying to do in all projects, but especially in this one. Straightforward plan leading out to the backyard. The kitchen and lower level of public space entry and so forth. So the project turns on one main issue, which is how can we provide privacy with windows on the one hand that are still very large, but on the other hand, relative to the idea of the general surface of the project, are very much in the realm of punched windows. But how can we create the illusion graphically, but not in pure 2D and 3D, to make this kind of sense of erosion of the mass much, much deeper? You can think of Corbusier. You can think of projects that have explored the deep wall quite a bit. Although, as you'll see, we're not interested in mass at the literal level, but at a kind of virtual level. This is the street elevation. So in looking at the drawings, the black surface, of course, represents the faciality of each facade surface, and you can see the radial conditions at the corner, also working with the conic surrounds of all of the windows, reducing the amount of flat surface in the project to something far less than half of it, and all of the unfolded surfaces. We make it a point just to work with developable surface stuff, and in particular making as much out of full conic quadrants as possible, so that we can just make transitions from radial conditions to gridded conditions, and it shows up as an operative device all over the work, over the last few years. Here's a view of the interior back to the door. You can see the simple proposition of no poche, and in terms of these surfaces, building them as thin as possible. And the view from the back. The kind of narrow discourse that I'm giving you on the project is a kind of a semiological reading, a kind of formalist reading, is really what I wanted to do tonight, to be relatively focused on that. So things that come from work that we were doing in the 90s in terms of the single surface project show up as a canopy, and corner windows, part of the canon of California modernism, also appear within the logic of connecting to the backyard, but also become oddly hybridized to the same sorts of closed configured windows that you see here. So the rhetoric of the work tries to be performative and rather specific from the program side, from the solar side, and also from the issue of, I would say, the cleanness, shall we say, of the surface geometry. And the second floor is just an open public space with a stair going up to the parents' bedroom, a stair down into the dining, and one stair that goes up into the two sons, and details through the house. And this is the main space on the second floor. So the kind of apertures are rather controlled. They're also rather invasive. Most people might not, most clients might not buy that sort of ergonomic relationship as it changes how you might engage the window. It wasn't our capriciousness that caused this project to stop. It was the classic divorce case. But you know. The dad said he's still going to give us a project. We're waiting for that. But okay. This is a photographer by the name of Beate Gutschau. She's a Swiss photographer, and I don't know if you know her work, but she basically takes the idea of 17th century landscape painting and reconstructs them through dozens and dozens of photographs. And it's all known. It's not a magical trick. It's possible. It can be done with digital technology. And to be able to produce it is less the issue as people like Gursky came forward and talked about their Photoshop skills and so forth. To be able to make an image on the one hand, though, that produces, in this case, the semblance of reality, as though she went out with a field camera and took a photograph and saw these people coincidentally out having a picnic, and the cropping of the view of the trees in sort of Caspar David Friedrich style, maybe not quite as dramatic, setting it up and composing it. Well, that's pretty much what we do. What you do when you make an image, or if you're concerned about making an image, because you generally make them from scratch. Totally make them from scratch. This is Tatiana Halban, also a European photographer, in this case, making something that might be on the surface apparently disastrous, but really, you know, when you look at the luster of the image, you know that it's a contrived, you know, sort of moment and stage set. How would a photographer have the time to take this shot? This photography would be more in the line of Cartier-Bresson decisive moment, running around with a camera. This is more like a field camera setting it up and taking the photograph. This is what we do when we make our images, right? Don't you sort of set a camera up and do something rather specific and say, I'm designing everything in that scene? Don't you do that? They do that. Jeff Wall, for a long time, now you know, sort of the master of this. He takes a month to set up a piece. And the luster of the images, the scale of the images, the fact that you both know that it's artifice, but also appreciate the fact that unless you went to the point of designing it this particular way, you'd never capture a shot like that. So if you're looking to design an image out of everyday life, you'd have to craft it. You'd have to set it up. You'd have to point the camera exactly how you want it, the right number of degrees, take away the perspective distortion, et cetera, et cetera. Josh Keyes is a Portland artist who I think in many ways we relate to as well. He doesn't use photography. He's a painter. And so in a funny way, because we don't use photography, we model, we generate all the geometry, even the trees and stuff. We're essentially taking new material and putting it out rather than falsifying something with found material. In this particular case, showing a cross-section of architectural material like a ground slab and inhabiting it with this kind of unthinkable, odd, strange, animated collision between nature, controlled nature, uncontrolled nature, suburbia, and so forth. This is a very influential set of images in our work. We took the people away. The people who live here stepped outside the frame when the camera was taking the photograph. It's obviously not a photograph. We rendered it, but we treat it as though it's a staged photograph. And the perfection of the image, the perfection of the surface, unlike Lebbeus's surfaces, they're clean, they're right out of the box. We don't use the ravages of time like Lebbeus did to argue and tell stories with. This is the precision of the defined fact of the house, and more drawings that talk to us about that. And this is the third floor, kind of Japanese packing of bedrooms, kids' bedrooms and toilets and so forth. Ed Richet, my interest in facts is central to my work, not that you'll find factual information in my work. Interesting. Probably have to agree the same thing about our stuff. This is Keelung, Taiwan. It's at the north end of the island, and we won a competition in September. This is the site for it. It's a port terminal project and a very, very large harbor authority office building. I know a number of colleagues in the audience did this. This goes out to the sea to connect to China, of course, and there's a huge amount of vessels coming from China into this port. It's a city of 350,000 people. Interesting to do a project in Asia of such a small size. Usually you think of the monsters like Shenzhen and Shanghai and so forth. This is almost like a fishing village still today. It's surrounded by lush green mountains, and it's about 20 kilometers away from Taipei, just through the mountains. Here's the site on this corner to this rectangular harbor overlooking really kind of odd landscape of, on the one hand, a kind of sprawl from the 1940s, sprawling up into the mountains, mostly built by Japanese and Japanese architects, and their Hollywood sign that they built in 1999-2000, which really warmed my heart, and I know to the Californians who did it as well. There's the view looking to the other. This is one of the lighthouses that guards the port, this black and white striped thing, which is so cool. They made a stamp out of it, and it was something that was, I think, very important, I think, to the work that we did, in not only in terms of trying to figure out how to deal with verticality in a project that kind of wanted to reject it, the proposition that the graphic is about visibility, and that issue in a climate which is always rainy was very much of concern to us, as well as the kind of port architecture, of course, that you would see. 137,000 square meters. This is the Voyager of the Sea's largest boat out there in Asia. and it's bigger than the whole program of our building, which is 100,000 square meters. So even more massive floating building is coming to dock at a building even smaller than that. But like the boat itself, one thing we thought just instinctively, well, actually not instinctively, after a whole series of possible ways in which this weird triangular site could be inhabited, we said it's got to be one big thing. We said, okay, let's use a courtyard project and then go through the process of deracinating this thing and getting it to a point where we could make one argument about it. It's a rainy climate. This is the first phase. This is, I'm showing you the prelim stuff that they were kind to let us into the second phase. A site that we, well, first of all, I should say in terms of these drawings, we rejected the idea of making photorealistic images because that was always the downfall of the work that we did. Too real, too known. You killed all the mystery. It's over. We don't want it. Finally, I learned and said, let's produce some mystery, get rid of the rest of it, and make a project which on the one hand was going to be about the vivid within a climate on the one hand that was rainy, kind of cloudy, misty, all the time. So we tried to make a project on the one hand, massing-wise, that was more like a cloud, more ambiguous and more vague, but through the nature of the facade and the color would become vivid. So could we make a vivid project that was also deeply unknowable at the same time? Could the vivid and the unknowable, could the thing that you could see, could the thing that you could sort of track in terms of facts, could it match up with the unpredictable? That's what we wanted to see if we could do in this particular phase. Giant office building here. This is a weird part of the program, which was a future phase of 25,000 square meters. We didn't know if it was an office building, a shopping center, et cetera. And the port terminal is stacked in this big block below with a connection to the water. Here are some images of some of the early propositions about how we were going to deal with movement and space within the project. With big, deep floor plans in the terminal, making pretty serious roofscapes and ceilingscapes and deep floor plans, how to essentially make voids, in this case, which were kind of prophylactic spaces and bubbles. You could move up through this space but not actually go into the ticketed area, go to the top of the roof, and move through in a series of membranes in curved glass with an inner layer of chartreuse color. Deeply articulated, like a primitive line drawing with massive black joints everywhere. You know, we had to do that because, number one, the line drawing thing was not really the obsession, but without those joints, we couldn't see the geometry. Everything else just sort of worked into a kind of a green fuzz. So for an architect who's interested in facts and in telling you exactly what's going on, hoping that I don't kill the mystery of it, making these lines and telling you how to read the geometry, we felt like is better than if we left them off and just sort of let it be a weird, ambiguous world. Building that might be a different story if we did mock-ups and said, well, if you don't have a black caulk joint or something, it could still read based on refractions and reflections of light and so forth, stuff that these renderings, of course, didn't pick up. So the second phase, we went to the site and we found the client had changed a lot of the parameters, and they made the demand that from the dock level on in, which is 85 meters, the terminal had to exist only on that part of the site and only the terminal. This was the strict orders from the client, and the rest of the project would have to be exiled out to this kind of large, odd triangle. I was shocked because you don't come in a competition and then suddenly make these changes, especially without giving more time, more money, more ability to be able to respond to it. And it had been our modus operandi to obey the height limit It had been our interest in that almost randomly as a guess. And I've talked to my colleagues out there who did other things, and we've chosen to disobey, obey competitions, guessing, second guessing, and so forth. I don't know. Maybe you get lucky sometimes in this sense, because working within the conditions of the site, and as we finally presented, I think was something, you know, in our favor. So this is the port terminal. It's 30,000 square meters. This is a 55,000 square meter office building. There's a scenic restaurant at the top of this tower and a big public plaza, all of which underneath is loaded with parking. This is very much a Chinese puzzle project once you get into the specifics of the site. And in fact, the specifics of the site in this particular case, especially after years and years and years of thinking about the nature of propriety in architecture, signature, what you own, what you don't own, what you're going to do no matter what you're going to do no matter what, no matter where. The things that everybody hates about architects, their piddly obsessions with exactly what they want to do all the time. And I still have a lot of those. But in this particular case, the project really tries to respond to this site as much as possible. We've got a corner condition that, here's the tower. This is the only tower moment in the project, and you saw the lighthouses and the idea of the vertical being very much probably a part of a conceptual way of making a figure within this harbor that would, quote unquote, stand out, because of course that was the demand. Every competition today, as you know, the first line is, please make an icon for us. Most people say we shouldn't be doing them because they're over, but somehow people keep demanding them. The terminal is really a kind of an expression of internal workings, including the ways in which skylights and cantilevered bays work to kind of capture movement systems and so forth. It's quite fun to work in this kind of near capacity of almost aviation-like responsiveness because of the nature of the program and its dynamics. Meanwhile, the office building is conceptually, you know, this big giant courtyard building that otherwise would be maybe at odds or very inert at the same time. How could we essentially weave a kind of dynamics through the office building, still have it be something that has its primitiveness and that could ground the site, was what we were trying to do. So the kind of things in terms of site responsiveness that we were working on in many ways was a profound kind of driver to the project, and also a kind of profound driver in the sense of letting the project accumulate as a series of conditions. One condition would lead to a connection that had another kind of condition. The office building and its kind of apparently stolid geometry gives way to holes in the building that allow views in and out. So not exactly a series of non sequiturs, not exactly a kind of exquisite corpse game, but if you look close, you'll see a certain kind of connectivity and dissonance all at the same time in the work itself. Do you know this project, the James Sterling Building at Oxford? 1971, really the best building. I'm obsessed with this project, and while we didn't have it taped up to the wall, I think all the SCI-Arc team here who worked on the project would know that I wasn't necessarily obsessing with it, but I know that there's a project of interest for me here in the relationship between not only the kind of tectonics of the structure, the bigness of it, the relationship between thick lines, thin lines, and a kind of set of structuring armatures. I see a great resemblance of this project to the office building, not in terms of program, obviously, but in terms of the way in which a thin, more or less a thin bay building could wrap around and make space. This is not the same project. This is the Olivetti building in Hazelmere from 1969, a couple of years before. This is the height of Sterling's, high-tech era before he starts to take another turn with Leo Creer. And I wanted to do that and say, yes, that is important to me. And the scale, the color, which I'll talk about in a minute, and essentially a project, when you look at these images, it really does say something like you're not going to be able to control the totality of the project. And this is pretty new for me. If you know my stuff, you know it's always the obsession to control. So here we're looking for facts, but not control. Here we're trying to produce facticity, but not the obsessiveness that would possibly kill mystery. Hey, wow. I went into my flat file and I found chartreuse from, this is about 1986 sheet maybe. And just to let you know, of course, I'm not the only architect who has the obsession with these colors, and it's been going on for a long time, especially in my office. Here's seafoam green as well, and here's drawings from the late 80s. And I didn't know why I was using these colors. And then it really dawned on me when we did some research. And for everybody who's used chartreuse in their built work, I know you know why. Chartreuse is the most vivid color in the world. With the least amount of light, it shows up more than any color on the planet. If you look at orange and black next to chartreuse at night, you can only see chartreuse because of the nature of the color. So we chose this, reverse engineered it, chose it into this project because it's cloudy and murky and you can't see the form of the building so clearly. And we didn't want the building to disappear, and so we wanted to make sure that at some level the geometry of this building would be highly described, highly articulated as we want it with these kinds of colors. It was the only way in which I could possibly imagine that a client would accept something like this. And when we presented it and I talked about the logic of nighttime and murky light, everybody shook their head because I'd somehow, the only thing I did was I switched my own obsession to a fact. I just converted my obsession, and there's actually a syndrome or an effect that this refers to. And it was maybe one of the only times in which I could actually convert an obsession into something that wasn't an argument, but was deadpan and straightforward, almost to the point of saying, there is no other color you could possibly put on this project that would be something other than a subjective meditation. Anyway, the other color happening inside, how am I doing on time? I'm going to wrap it up. Seafoam green inside. We only had one rule, which is in the office building, you're going to look out at seafoam green and all of the chartreuse is relegated to areas where you won't see it. So we switched from chartreuse to seafoam green so these guys don't have to look at that color, because seafoam green actually is a pleasant color. It allows people to kind of be calm, to be productive and so forth. That's why it's used in schools. It's also used in asylums. So there's rules to exactly how this stuff, you know, is and it's going to work. Plans. This is the loft section of the office building. It's about 17 meters wide. No columns in the interior. And oddly enough, we have two types of skins. And I'll talk about that in a second. A punch skin and basically a double skin with storefront glazing and a continuous perforated aluminum. So the thing about the skin, here's the structure inside. And the structure is relatively rigorous, even for this submission. Thornton Thomas said he did an amazing job. You can see it running down the building. Now, typically, let's say like CCTV, all of the structure, of course, has an opaque metal panel embossed in it, and then glazing. We reject the structure inside having any influence at all on the facade. We couldn't bear the idea of not introducing something else to the conversation by saying we're going to put metal panels in front of the, the structure, and we're going to have glazing everywhere else, because you know what, that makes the most sense. Why would you put a window behind a boxed out diagonal? Why on earth would you do it? No architect in their right mind would do it. It doesn't make any sense. Seems stupid. Yeah, probably. So what we're trying to do with this project is introduce a relationship of figure to overall form. This is the famous bridge in Le Mans with a rectangle cut out of this big tire. And of course, the white block painted on top of the Venturi fire station #4. Fantastic building, fantastic. It's all because of the white paint, of course. Without the white paint, nothing sort of happens. We were working on this project simultaneously this summer. This is one of the giant, typical Chinese projects that offices have been getting, and this was our second one, 150,000 square meters of office space, hotel, and shopping in Yichang, which is near the, it's on the Yangtze River near the Three Gorges Dam. We called it still life urbanism. It was a 35-story tower, 16-story tower, and a 12-story horizontal project. And in working on it preliminarily, of course, we run into all of the usual kinds of things in terms of architectural rhetoric relative to envelope design. And I suppose if you make this particular rendering, a lot of people might say, great, we're done, perfect, nice, complete. And again, we couldn't bear the thought of allowing that to go into existence because we wouldn't add anything to the conversation on envelope design, maybe on our urban realm in this kind of idea of still life urbanism, and to the geometry of the project. But all we did was just essentially reject the obvious way in which the patterning of the structure would work. And nice thing is the clients asked for a building that was 50% opaque, same as a high-rise we did in 2010. So this project was, I think, deeply influential to us at the same time of working on this facade for the office building, which rejects the logic of structural expression and works more insistently in its own way. Now, the way in which we can get around this is not an office building for spec. Hedge fund millionaires aren't going to go into it and complain there's a window behind my column. This is a world of workers who are all working in a kind of cooperative world. The figures of the project are about responding to local views, not only of the landscape of the harbor, but also of the building itself. We spent a lot of time, obviously, on the roof plane of the terminal and plans section. The interior is primarily dominated by a large atrium, which to get around the kind of shopping mall stratification is here skinned with a stainless steel chainmail that we're going to propose for the project. And this is on the 3rd floor in the terminal. I'm going to finish with finish. I'm going to try and go as fast as I can. Finish could equal complete. Finish can equal luster. And finish can equal death. Finish can equal exhausted. We all deal with finish. But the conversation about finish in architecture right now is generally finish is bad, especially in all three of these terms. If you finish something and completed it, move on. If you finish something and the luster is too high, it's wrong. Of course, if you finish something and it's dead, then it's really the worst case of finish. So I'm going to let you think about finish and make your own unpredictable responses relative to those possible ideas in this project that we got to build, miraculously enough, in New York, which is a lot about finish. All of those, possibly. Not the least of which, of course, is luster. And a great project for an architect who's obsessed with facts, who's obsessed with how long, how high, what's the radius, how much, how thick, how transparent. Obsessed with all of that. And I know you are too. There's not anyone more obsessed than me, but I know there's a lot of people equally as obsessed. One of the bigger obsessions in the project relative to the project is this particular case, which is, miraculously enough, we have a site with a captive audience of thousands of people a day. Dead of winter, heat of summer, there's thousands of people every day staring at this project, and we knew it, and we couldn't believe it. A built-in audience of people who couldn't care one bit about it, of people who would bother to take a picture, of people who would bother to make comments and remarks about it, a city that would allow this to happen because of the High Line. This is really a kind of a special place. But this building don't have the same optical relationship to these people as this project. It's the only one. And that really drove, obviously, everything. This is from the north looking to the south, and you can begin to see, obviously, what the relationship of the building is to the High Line. We asked for 8 waivers. One was a straw waiver. It went away, and we got 7 miraculously given to us over the course of a year through city planning. Amanda Burden and city planning were just incredible advocates for the project. 40% of the floor plate was illegal. The client didn't want to build a skinny building, and we found ourselves with a dare that we didn't even have to supply ourselves. So in a funny way, we were given the unpredictable component of the factical equation, and we had to, like the time capsule, we had to reverse engineer our way back to how high, how tall, what's the radius, how's it going to work? Because we were working within a very, very unpredictable realm ourselves. Here's one where we asked for a sloping facade on the sky plane, where typically you can only do a wedding cake. This was 2 of the waivers that were granted. Here's a view closer to the High Line. And you can see the relationship to it. And our argument, for the project, on the one hand, was supplied by the client. I need more square meters. I'm not going to build it if you can't do that. How you go about it, what you do to achieve it, and so forth is part of it. So, of course, these profiles, which subtly sort of cantilever, allow the project to cantilever out over the site. In many respects, we're just trying to do the same thing that this stuff is doing, and we're trying to argue that this is a kind of hard, factual form of poetic stuff, just like this is. And so, in presenting, the project, we're talking about the way in which this becomes a kind of vertical ecology of the park. In these shots that are absolutely on the axis, in this case, down the grid of of 10th Avenue, you see the relationship of the 2D profile of the project and the way in which the kind of profiles build up. And once you move past the building, it shifts from being a project about the confrontational and the zoom lens to something that's very much rotational and kind of sculptural, as you see here, once the side of the building starts to come into play and these shaped metal panels begin to give off a lot of the color of what's going on the High Line. But what's amazing about it is this particular spur, which created one of the conditions of the site. This actually moves 5 feet into the site, making the site for years and years undevelopable until global wealth arrived in Manhattan, allowing all of these other buildings to be built, it's as though the garden just goes right into the building, and the building is sitting directly on the axis of the garden, and that's part of the optical aspect of the project. And here it's less optical and more aikido and very visceral in terms of the relationship of the High Line, the rest of the city, the grid, and a building that agrees to the street wall and disagrees to the street wall. But with the project, we knew that the client asked for a curtain wall on the north and south. Makes sense. You've got views in perpetuity forever. There'll probably be tall buildings here, so the east facade is more protected. So the logic not only of light and air and shadow, which we had to manage, otherwise we couldn't build the project, was also predicted by the way in which development was going to work in and around the High Line. You see the geometry of all of this. To pull off a couple of the optical things, because in many ways this building was purely an urban project. It's a machine otherwise in terms of its value. It's a real estate machine for luxury housing. It went into a market of which a lot of architects got the opportunity to use that project to experiment with. We have glass that goes from floor to ceiling. There's no spandrel. There's a spreader beam which is connected to a steel mullion. And I'll show you how that works. And so we're trying to get rid of horizontal lines so that the building will optically appear to be more like 3 big stories rather than 14 smaller ones. This is the factory in China. We made 20 man trips to Shenzhen with 4 hours of driving into mainland China to look at this glass, not because we didn't trust them, but because we were just that obsessed with the material conditions. The glass was made next door. 186 different frit patterns were used, not one repeated, the world's least efficient frit pattern. And steel frames which were then all composited with aluminum cassettes and dropped into place. And like a lot of projects, it got skinned very quickly. And this is the outcome. So the relationship of the structure to the glazing and also to this stripe is something that has been an interesting point of reflection in the project. We put the stripe on the structure, and it's an odd kind of thing to think about relative to the project in Taipei, which rejects the structure as participating in the graphic rhetoric of the project. Here, it dominates it, and for one main reason, which is these blinds are down 50% of the time for privacy. This is how people generate privacy, and of course, when the blinds are down, the structure disappears. And I didn't want that. I wanted the structure to be telegraphed perpetually, all the time, every day, every second. So the program is to make a doppelganger or a 2D structure so that you're never not gonna have it. And I argue that that's such a hyper-modern project, not a postmodern project, to argue that there's logic and there's use and there's facthood in the way in which the structure needs to be imprinted, because otherwise the project doesn't have the same legibility, doesn't have the same iconicity, and somehow it also doesn't work in the same way in its relationship between 2D and 3D sort of optics. Like snowflakes, each one of these apartments are all different as they move up the building. These are the facts. The stainless steel panels are also an important part of the project. They were sized in terms of this dimension to be able to deal with a 4-foot radius. 4-foot radius was the only radius we could make to be able to allow these panels to be as big as possible and not facet too much as we go over the radius here. So the geometry in terms of the way in which the dimensions of the panel, which is why they're only 18 inches, operates the way they are. Because we had so many horizontal joints, the ambition was to get rid of as many vertical joints as possible. So these are 11 feet 6. And that was a real troublesome exercise that I'll just let you in on. Before we came up with these panels, we were looking at odd things like ductile, which was too inert and too dead. And we went to Zahner and looked at folded panels, and they couldn't quite get up to the task of some of the length that we were dealing with. We finally decided on the geometry and also the fabricator in Buenos Aires. We produced, of course, all the geometry, and the panels were made. But I'll tell you one thing. We made the dies for this. They're stamped, and we had to build a giant steel casket to put the dies in because the press was only 8 feet long, the biggest one in all of South America. Makes Mercedes-Benz parts. So we had cantilevered ends in this die. And when we took the first panels off, what happened was the geometry that we had so set out in Rhino, digital fidelity, you imagine, can be reproduced by machines where not human hands are touching them. But the deformation was so mild out at the ends of this pattern that the shape memory and the springback effect of the stainless steel meant that once we took them out of the molds, only about half of the deformation came out. So, you know, it's curious. We give them facts, they milled it, we specified the material, the machine stamped it, all based on the expectation of perfection in the digital world, and it didn't happen because we didn't know how the shape memory and the alloy of the steel would work. We actually had to go back. I flew to Argentina. Neil, what are we going to do? I said, I guess we're just going to have to exaggerate the geometry. How much? I said, I don't know, maybe that much? Not very digital. Besides the fact it took another month to remill all the steel, polish it, put it back in, it finally worked. Just a little bit of a curious lesson. You know, in the old days, architects were obligated to be precise, taught to be precise. Now, today, it goes from obligation to expectation. I have tools, they're machines, they will do exactly what I want. I expect it to work this way. I don't even have to have an obligation. It's curious, the shift now, especially in a case like this where what we expected didn't happen. Thanks very much.